We're sisters, best friends, and authors on a mission to help you stoke your creative fire and live the life of your dreams. We believe that purpose fuels passion and that creativity is your secret weapon for mass construction. There's never been a better time to bless the world with your dream realized. You're listening to The Kate and Abbie Show.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of The Kate and Abbie Show. We hope you are well and getting ready, possibly, to write a novel maybe this coming November. We've been doing a couple episodes about Preptober and getting ready to write either perhaps for Nanowrimo or perhaps maybe you're just starting a book in general. We're dedicating this time of year to getting ready to write and how you can set yourself up for greatness. So we're going to continue in that theme today with talking about some of the ways that we wish we had gotten started with our first novels and our Nanowrimo novels. As a lot of you know, I have never done a Nanowrimo. Abbie has done many. So I will kind of be kicking it off with asking Abbie some questions about things that she wishes that she had known when she first started doing Nanowrimo, and I'll add in some of my thoughts on things I wish I had known when I started my first novel, some of my early works, etc. But before we dive into today's topic,
we have to thank our sponsors, who are you guys. You're the ones who support this show and keep it going, and we so appreciate your support. So if you get value out of this podcast, go to patreon.com/The Kate and Abbie Show and help us keep this show alive and free of interruptions.
So let's dive in today's topic.
Yeah.
What we wish we had known when we first started out with Nanowrimo or started out writing your first novel. So what is something that if you could go back in time to the first time you did Nanowrimo, do you remember your first Nanowrimo novel?
Yeah, I do.
Was it 100 Days of Sunlight?
No,
Oh, okay,
it was a different one. It was 2016. That 100 Days of Sunlight was 2017.
Okay, so 2016 was your first
Yeah.
Nanowrimo. So if you could travel back in time and address yourself with some sort of very wise monologue, what would you what pieces of advice would you give yourself? What's like something you would tell yourself?
The first, probably most important thing that I would tell myself is to not rush. And that seems kind of counterintuitive for NaNoWriMo because obviously you are challenging yourself to write a whole novel in 30 days. So it's kind of like already inherently rushing to write this novel or to achieve the word count goal, which is 50,000 words. And 50,000 words in 30 days is a lot of words for a lot of people. Not for everybody. Sometimes it some writers write that like in a week, which is crazy to me.
That is crazy.
But it's awesome. But at the time it was a big challenge for me, and it was the first time I ever did it. So I felt like I need to hurry up and make sure I show up every single day and get the word count in. If I let the word count slide a little bit, so the word count is, I believe, it's like 1,600 and change for every day. If you like break it up into 30 days, I believe. So generally the word count goal for each day is like 1,700 words, which doesn't seem like a lot. But then when you fall behind one day, it's like, oh, now I have to write twice as much today. And that pressure to write a certain number of words sometimes takes the joy out of the writing process itself. Sometimes it can work as a great motivator to show up for yourself and to accomplish something great, obviously. That's the reason why we do it, to push ourselves. But it can also be creatively limiting because if you're focused so much on, I have to accomplish this word count number today, it takes some of the joy out of the actual writing process. So I think that was something that took the joy out of it for me. The first time around was I was too focused on getting the word count in, and I actually had challenged myself to do something like extra crazy that day. I was the first day rather of NaNoWriMo, I had been chatting with a group of writer friends online for Preptober, during Preptober, and there was like this challenge thing among the group to do, I think it was 10,000 words in one day. So like the first day, write 10,000 words. It was like this crazy challenge thing. And so like all day long, I was trying to write 10,000 words on November 1st, and I was chatting with with my writer friends and trying to hit the goal and seeing them like get ahead of me and feeling like, oh no, I'm falling behind. And it was not an enjoyable experience. It was something that I definitely, if I could go back, I would not do it again, because I was challenging myself to do something that I knew was really out of my comfort zone for creatively creating something. That's a super redundant phrase, but you know what I mean.
Right.
Like feeling creative and enjoying the process while you're creating something.
Comfort zones usually are looked at as a negative, but in some cases there is a difference between a comfort zone and things that make you comfortable in your art.
Right.
So if there is a certain style and a certain way that you write, there's nothing wrong with that. And so you don't have to feel like, oh, I have to change this now to facilitate writing in greater volume. Well, not necessarily. Just because someone else does that doesn't mean that you have to do that if it causes you to feel creatively cramped.
Yeah, exactly. And I was thinking during that writing session, I was thinking about like, if I'm not proud of what I just wrote, if I don't feel good about what I just wrote, I really don't feel confident enough to continue, and that's really always been the case for me with writing is I have to feel good about what I just wrote in order to continue and to feel creative even, I discovered that I couldn't just like hack my way through a manuscript and just write anything that comes to my mind. It doesn't matter if it's messy, it's a first draft. Yes, some writers do write like that and it works for them, but I found that it did not work for me, which I'm glad that I discovered that like the hard way. So, experiences are definitely always a good thing if you learn from them, right, and you learn something valuable and you can move on with new information that will improve your creative process going forward. So that was definitely the first thing that I learned is like rushing is just not for me. It doesn't make me feel motivated, and it's actually has the opposite effect on me. And there's so much more value to be found in taking your time and connecting with your inspiration, even if that means that you're not writing as fast as your friends are, or if you don't meet the word count goal that you set for yourself on day one, or even for the whole 30 days of Nanowrimo. What matters the most is that you show up for yourself and that you enjoy the creative process of making something beautiful.
Right. And it's good to remember to keep your eyes on your own lane, on your own creative lane. That's a
huge thing too.
Because your creative process isn't going to look like someone else's creative process. Your needs are different. Your thought processes are different. You shouldn't try to make your process look like someone else's. And so whenever you enter into something that feels a bit more like a contest, even though I know it's not competing against other people, but you're challenging yourself, it's a writing challenge, you can tend to look at other people in the group and how they're doing it and, oh, maybe I should be doing it that way. But you shouldn't feel the need to do that. You should keep your focus on how can I write this to the best of my personal ability, not to the best of someone else's personal ability, because every single person's creative process is going to be different. So it's important to remember that and not get distracted with comparing yourself to other creators.
Yes, very true.
Which leads into another thing similar to rushing is putting pressure on yourself. Yeah. Whether it's to sort of meet a standard or set by someone else or a group, a writing group, or a standard you set in your own mind for yourself, what you wish you could be doing. A lot of us, I think, have, whether you're writing for Nanowrimo or starting out on your first novel or starting out on your fifth novel, this can creep in, this sort of idea that you have this fantasy writer, a fantasy author in your head, not an author who writes fantasy, but like the fantasy version of yourself being this author who has no bad writing days and hits a certain amount of words every day and writes without getting distracted at all. And having this image of this ideal in our minds can sometimes lead us to be overly self-critical when we see ourselves falling short, and we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be this perfect version of our authorly selves. That I think in many ways, of course, it's good to have goals to not get distracted. We talk about that all the time. However, don't put a ton of pressure on yourself to be this perfect author, because sometimes that can actually negatively affect your own creative flow when you're expecting so much of yourself and putting so much pressure on yourself to perform in a certain way, to write X amount of words or to not get distracted for X amount of hours. And then when you fall short of that, it's like, oh no, I didn't meet my goal. I feel so bad. But that self-criticism isn't necessarily beneficial.
No, yeah, it definitely is not. Like, we all want to improve our creative processes, but the best way to do that is not by criticizing yourself, but just observing what is it that you need. What are your needs? Even if you have to journal about it and kind of meditate on it, figure out what you need, because your creative process is different than anybody else's. And you can glean inspiration from others, but don't try to just copy what may have worked for somebody else and assume that it's going to work for you. Their creative process is totally different, and so their writing routine or whatever might not work for you, and that's okay, because we all have different unique ways of creating and bringing our ideas to life. So it's the most important thing is that you find what works for you, and I think that's important to find the balance there, like you were saying, between thinking of this ideal that you're trying to achieve, because it's really not, it's not an achievement. Who you are does not come from something you've achieved or a writing routine or your habits or whatever. We kind of have like this romanticized version of ourselves in our mind, thinking that, oh, we fit this description so perfectly. Well, maybe we don't, and maybe that's okay.
Right.
It's okay, and whatever you are is what you are supposed to be. Like, you are where you're supposed to be on your path. Exactly. And if you feel like you aren't where you're supposed to be, then that's like, something that you can personally go seek out to find more of the answers to.
Right. Not judging yourself or evaluating yourself based on your actions alone and what you're doing. Who you are is not just what you create. You're someone outside of that. Creation should be an outflow. Not how we value ourselves completely. Like, oh, I value myself based on how much I can write. So then on days when maybe I don't feel like writing, or maybe I have a lousy writing day and now I'm all down on myself, because that's actually how I identify who I am as an individual. So we can step back from that and identify outside of that. You know what I mean? We are creative, beautiful, loved individuals outside of anything we make. And then if we make something, cool. Yeah. It's really as simple as that. Yeah. And it sounds overly simplified, but it really is. We, as humankind likes to complicate things.
True.
Let's get back to a more simplistic way of looking at things. When you first started out Nanowrimo, were you super obsessed with word count on your first one? How did you handle that? Because I know that's a big topic around this time of year for writers who might be starting Nanowrimo. They're hearing a lot about word count, like you even were talking about, okay, you have to write this many words per day in order to reach this particular goal of 50,000 words. So how did you handle that? Were you like very laser focused on word count when you first started out?
Yeah, I would say that I was too laser focused on it, because what ended up happening was I kind of set the 50,000 words as like this goalpost in my mind of I need to write the 50,000 words, that it actually, I would say that it partially limited my creativity with the story, because the story ended up being like 55,000 words or something. It was like a really short book. And it felt like there could have been more. I don't even know how to like explain it, but it was almost like my brain like set this goalpost as like, when you reach that, you're done. And so I was just like trying to get to that place. And then the story ended up like fitting that mold sort of in my mind of like, okay, 50,000 words, we're wrapping it up. We're done, because I wanted to be done. And so I think that was not necessarily the best thing for the story. I still love that story. I think it has some good ingredients, good bones that I want to rework it and rewrite it. But I feel like I sometimes the question like what else could have happened? Where else could that story have led me if I hadn't put up sort of these barriers, these like walls in my mind of, when I reach this word count, I'm done, and over the years, I've kind of been able to see it differently with Nanowrimo of it's kind of just the beginning, and however long the book ends up being, cool. It won't necessarily take me 30 days, but I'll try to write 50,000 words in 30 days. And other books that I've done during Nanowrimo have turned out to be longer. But 100 Days of Sunlight is a perfect example of a really good NaNoWriMo that was awesome. And I actually finished that book in 27 days. And that's,
that's amazing.
To this day, it is my like shortest, quickest novel writing process ever.
That's amazing.
Because that was like I think I wrote 76,000 words in the first draft, and I cut out a few thousand words. But yeah, 27 days. And that was like a record-breaking thing for me, and so that was really exciting. But I think I enjoyed myself more during in the second year of Nano. Like I changed a few things about my process. I also went more inward, and it was a very personal journey for me writing that book. So it was more I would say I spent less time focusing on the external and other people who were, sharing their word counts and stuff. And I focused less on like the competitive side of it and more on just like, how do I bring this story to life in a way that feels right to me?
Yeah, that kind of ties into a concept I've been thinking about with even things like meditation really teaches you this, is usually you have the best experiences when you're not trying to make it be a certain experience. When you can relax and just let go and let it be whatever it is, and not be, I'm trying so hard to make it be this perfect experience. That's usually when it really is partially your ego driving it, because you want it to be a certain thing for XYZ reasons, rather than just letting it flow, letting it come to you, letting it be what it is, and appreciating and having gratitude for it as it is, instead of needing to make it into a certain thing. And I think that's often when our best work comes to us.
True. Yeah, I agree.
So you've talked a lot about scheduling time for writing undisturbed with as few distractions as possible, which is an important thing if you can do that to some extent. Yeah. So what are some of the ways that you do that currently? Like, so you're doing NaNoWrimo this year. Right?
Probably not.
Probably not. Okay. Because I can remember if you were talking about doing some of it or not. But
yeah, I mean, I'm going to make time to write in November.
Because you're releasing your new book.
Yeah,
November's going to be hectic.
A busy month.
It'll be fun though. Yeah. So, right. Because I couldn't remember, because I knew you were like thinking about it for a minute, and then you're like, oh, that's way too much.
Yeah.
But when you're writing though, so how are you handling that now? What are some of the ways that you what are some of the things you put in place to try to create undisturbed writing time?
Well, I think the first thing for me is knowing what kind of writing day I like to have. And over the years, my process has changed a lot. But at this point in time, I really, really enjoy having writing days where I don't have to think about anything else except writing. And just from dawn till dusk, I can write if I want to. So that does take some forethought. It takes some planning, moving things around in my schedule, making sure that I have a day or 2 days or 3 days, if it's a really awesome week, where I can do nothing except write and focus on the book. Particularly with writing a first draft, because that requires kind of this going into your mental realm of creativity, and shutting out the rest of the world, so to speak. So I can't be dividing my attention too much. I find. I used to be better at that, honestly. I feel like I used to be better at dividing my attention and, multitasking and, I'll do this for a few hours and then, move on to writing. But I found that it started to feel like a lot of pressure. And it did work for a season of my life, but I feel like I'm in a different season right now that I prefer to schedule things like days in advance, or to know like, okay, on Sunday I have, my writing day or whatever the case may be. And that is sort of sacred in a way, you're setting aside like sacred time to spend on your creativity, on your creative projects. And that has been really fulfilling for me lately. So I realized that with Nanowrimo, obviously that's not the case for a lot of people. You can't take every single day of November to do nothing but write. Like, that would be amazing. I think we all agree that would be amazing, but that's unrealistic for most of us. So I think if you find that it works for you, that you can get more words in, like let's say you can take all day to write and have a 5,000 word day or a 7,000 word day, then maybe that would be more profitable or, more fulfilling for your goals to take 2 or 3 days a week where you can do that. 2 days a week. Okay, that's 10,000 words in a week, which is pretty good. That's, a quarter of 40,000 and almost 50,000. So if you got 2 days a week where you could have 2 5,000 word days, and then maybe sprinkle in a couple of other hours throughout the week that you can get other word count accomplishments in, then you can also hit the goal the same way, but a different method. So I think it's all about finding what works the best for you in your life, because some of us just won't have time to sit down and write 1,700 words every day. It might not seem like a lot from the outside looking in, but it is a lot if you have to like focus, get in the zone, and all that time spent concentrating and getting into what you're writing and then writing is time that maybe you could have saved if you did it all at once. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like spent more time focused rather than breaking it up. But again, it really depends on your creative process and what works best for you. I find that what works best for me currently is to have those more focused, higher content writing days where I can get more done more efficiently because I am really like in flow.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you find times where you flow really well, if you can allow yourself to just continue, sometimes that can be more beneficial than even setting up, okay, every morning I do this for X amount of time. If you're like, wow, I'm really flowing right now, it's going great. If you have the ability to extend that time, then that's great to be able to do that.
Yes.
And if you're someone who works or has kids, or you're just not able to fit that in, like I would love to be able to keep writing, but I have to go take care of my kids or something like that. Try to figure out, is there a particular time of day when you feel like that often? Maybe it's first thing in the morning before anyone's awake and it's just like, oh, yes, this is my me time. Maybe try to return to that each morning and have that undisturbed time where it triggers your creative flow. Because sometimes there are very clear triggers like, okay, first thing in the morning, or maybe, at night before I go to bed, I take a couple hours and I write and let all my thoughts flow. Like, it's different per person. So if you find that something specific really triggers your creative flow, try to return to that, because I think that can really be helpful sometimes. Yeah. And I think another important thing too, to wrap this up, is to remember to take care of yourself, to take time to fill the cup, to be looking after yourself, to implement some type of self-care, mind, body, and spirit, to fill yourself up so you feel like creating. For a lot of more competition, contest, writing challenge type of things, we tend to get so focused on just producing that we can often forget to take at least a day or two to step back and take care of ourselves, make sure we're nourishing ourselves each and every day so that we feel like creating. Yeah. I think that's a huge aspect.
Yeah, for sure. That is definitely a big element to staying fueled creatively and physically as well. that's something that I know we're going to talk more about next week in our next podcast, but that's something that has helped me a lot with Nanowrimo in the past and with really every writing project that I embark on is making sure that I have things in place ahead of time, that I'm taking care of myself. I'm not neglecting my body or my soul. I'm not neglecting my mental health in order to get stuff done. A lot of times that's something that I used to fall into a lot because just that's kind of how my personality is. Just like
you get super laser focused.
Yes.
But then you end up feeling, I don't even feel like creating, and you end up feeling like you're almost forcing yourself to. And you really want to be creating from this place of like, I can't wait to sit down and write.
Yeah.
We actually did a few episodes that are about kind of more self-care for writers. I will link some of those episodes down below in the description of the video version of this podcast. If you haven't listened to those, I highly recommend going back and listening to those episodes and taking some notes if you're like, oh yeah, I want to get a good self-care routine down pat for NaNoWriMo. Those are a great place to start because we talk about a lot of things that we practice personally to fuel ourselves in way of nutrition, spiritual practices, meditative practices, all kinds of goodies that can just kind of help to springboard ideas for better ways to take care of yourself, because that's truly where creativity springs from, is a place of wellness within. And stillness, centeredness within, I think, is the best place to create from.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, and I know we're going to talk about this more next week, but that is one of the secret weapons, in my opinion, to writing faster first drafts without having to rush or pressure yourself to get a certain number of words in every day. So we're gonna dig deeper into that in next week's episode. So stay tuned for that. More Preptober content coming at you. Until then, we are both working on publishing new books, which is super exciting.
Yes.
Kate just released her new book last week.
I did. I just released it. Searching for Sparrow. Out everywhere books are sold online.
Go check it out.
Go grab a copy.
Definitely grab a copy. Preferably paperback or hardcover because they're beautiful.
Abbie designed the interior. Gorgeous interior. Prettiest book by far that I've ever released. Abbie
is so pretty.
Is such a multi-talented artist. You've got to see the inside of this book. I showed a little bit on my live stream that I did a couple days ago. A couple evenings ago, I went live on my YouTube channel and showed you guys a sneak peek of the interior because it's so pretty. So Go watch that and go grab your own copy. Abbie's got a book coming out this November.
Yes, November 1st.
So not only do you have NaNoWriMo to look forward to if you're doing that, but you have Abbie's amazing new book to look forward to.
Yes. Very excited to share that one with you guys. More stuff about that coming to my channel soon, so keep an eye out for that.
Yeah, I'm so excited for that. It's gonna be
thank
cool.
you guys again so much for watching and listening. Thank you to our sponsors for supporting this podcast. We love you guys so much. Our patrons, if you love this show, go to patreon.com/The Kate and Abbie Show and help us keep it alive and free of interruptions. And we will see you guys next week.
Until then, stay stoked
and rock on.